What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Of Ash and Steel, which, to put it as succinctly as possible, is basically just a reimagined Gothic. But before we actually dive into that, to give a little bit of context here, Of Ash and Steel is an upcoming third-person RPG, obviously inspired by Gothic, but emphasis on the upcoming part, as you'll probably surely notice in just this video. It's currently a little rough around the edges, and that is primarily because I am bringing you this via a closed playtest. I believe that they have open signups, but the playtest itself is closed. In particular, though, just going off of vibes, I would say this is probably like a pre-alpha, maybe an alpha at most, and as such, it's obviously going to be a little rough around the edges because it is still actively being worked on. That is probably most noticeable in dialogues and things, so something I've noticed is that when the game pulls up a menu, it doesn't necessarily stop your character from actually moving. So for instance, you can be in a conversation and still press the buttons to like unsheath your weapon and things like that, which can get a little silly. But those kind of bugs is what you would expect from a game in this stage of development, is basically what I'm saying. And as such, this is more about the potential of what this game can be as opposed to what it is literally right now. Now, this game initially came onto my radar because it is being published by tinyBuild, which is a pretty popular indie publisher that has done some games I've enjoyed in the past. But what really caught my attention was that they were describing it as a game that mixes things like The Witcher with, of course, Gothic. But the thing is, to me, it's mostly just Gothic. It does do a couple of extra things and tries to evolve that formula a little bit, but that is pretty much the gist of it. To back up a little bit, though, let's actually talk about what Of Ash and Steel is all about. So for starters, we play as a character named Tristan. We do not get to create a character, set character. And Tristan just so happens to be a cartographer, sent to help with things like navigation on the way to an island known as Greyshaft. There's been trouble here before previously, as you learn pretty quickly, which would allude to the fact that this mission isn't exactly a standard procedure. Unsurprisingly, almost immediately after getting to grips with the prologue, we get attacked, and then attacked again, which sees us effectively lost, stranded, and alone on a pretty hostile island that it is our goal to escape, but also get to the bottom of the broader story as well. It's interesting enough for what it is. There are some allusions to things like factions that we could potentially join. In particular, there's a big mention of the Knights of the Order, the religion of the area as well as some local factions, of course. And you're likely going to need their help navigating the island because it is a rough and tumble place. As with the original Gothic series, you start the game very, very weak. Just battling off regular monsters will be quite the challenge if you are playing on the intended difficulty, as there are 3, easy, normal, and hard. So you gotta watch out. Now, as a cartographer, we have basically 0 combat experience and thus are really bad at combat at first. In order to get better, we're going to have to gain experience as well as find things like potions to accrue skill points. You can't just spend those straight away, but rather you spend those skill points at a trainer in addition to other resources to increase your attributes and then get a hold of actual skills, which is how you're going to make your character better over time, which is then going to let you do things like equip better and better gear, and presumably, it's not in this demo, but presumably you'll wind up joining a faction and things to get access to better and better equipment like armor, which will drastically mitigate incoming damage and allow you to do more. Now, while there is magic in the game, like you see people casting magic and the like, at least as far as this playtest goes, I really didn't see anything that was specifically like that here. But the melee combat seems to have a pretty big focus. There's going to be things like different combat stances, active skills, weapons, and things. So, not exactly mind-blowing or anything, but they're clearly putting in some effort there, and I'm curious to see if that will expand out to things like proper ranged weapons. You see some bows and stuff here and there. And then, of course, just actual magic. Combat isn't the only highlight, however. It is an RPG after all, and already just in this playtest, there is certainly some choice and consequence. You can choose to do certain things or lie to people outright, that kind of thing, and you can even see some of those immediate consequences happen. You can attack pretty much anybody, but there are repercussions to that if you don't have the strength to back it up, as one would expect, and to be fair, it does look like they will typically knock you out first before killing you outright if they can avoid it, which again, very par for the course in terms of Gothic. Now, even beyond that stuff, there are other side systems as well. There is obviously crafting. You can learn recipes and the like, and then make those at various craft workshops. What I also thought was interesting is that there is a day-night cycle, and to sort of coincide with that, there is also a camp system as well. You can find little campgrounds, and if you have camp supplies, you can make camp there, which is a good place to cook, obviously, but it looks like there's also going to be a skill for crafting potions at these campsites, as well as a place to just, rest and actually pass the time. And it does look like the island will, at least in part, respond to what time of day it is, based on just like what enemies are around, that kind of thing. I'm curious to see how involved that system is. But as of right now for Ash and Steel, that's kind of where I'm at with it as a whole. I'm mostly just interested, which is obviously why I'm bringing you this video, because at the very least, it seems like it will be a pretty faithful representation of that particular gameplay loop that made the Gothic series popular. And to be fair, it's very fun to see your character grow over time and make tangible progress as you, of course, work things out on your own, gather up equipment, and really strive to be that hero you want to be. I think if they can, of course, couple that with interesting systems, in particular things like, of course, making combat especially interesting, alongside RPG choices, which they show off a little bit of here, which is why I'm intrigued, but if they can carry that across to the main story, especially like, say making joining a faction being a particularly memorable experience and not just a slightly different color of the same thing as an example, then I think they will certainly be onto something. Now, in terms of when this game is releasing, I have absolutely no idea. I don't think they do either. This is, again, a very early look at this game, and as a result, I doubt we'll have any information on that front for quite some time. I would not expect this until probably like late 2026 at the earliest, probably later. But we will certainly see what happens. I will obviously keep people up to date because I am, again, following this myself. I'm curious if they can pull it off, and as such, you can certainly expect any, interesting updates there is to know about this in the future, which is as good a place as any to wrap this up. So if any of that sounds good to you, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.